Hi, today I will be painting some of these newish Chaos Warriors in a sort of Grimdark style. It will in many ways be similar to the paint job I did with the Bretonians a while ago, in the sense that they will not be individual pieces of art, but they will be grim and dark enough to support a general and some monsters that you do actually spend your time on. And they will also be simple enough to actually get you some more time on those more prominent units. The point here is not to revolutionize the painting community. I think, regular contrast paint is just doing a fine job as well. But the point is to, show you that there are alternatives. And along the way, there might be a thing or two that you want to pick up and incorporate to your own painting. So let's go. No, Games Workshop did not send me any free miniatures to preview, and I don't expect them to do so anytime soon. Therefore, I will have to work with these. They are a pretty cheap second-hand purchase and are in a corresponding shape as well. Quite literally half of them have broken weapons, just standing there looking like Darth Vader. I could probably use them in some sort of Star Wars game, but you probably can't field 6 Darth Vader. That would just get very awkward when all claim to be Luke's father. Anyway, my crappy miniatures are not your concern, so let's jump into the future where they are already ready to go. Last time I did Nurgle, but as far as I can tell, the old world rules does not promote the use of a single god in your army. This is not the topic here, perhaps there will be a word about it in the end, or another video. The point is that I'm still free to do them in whatever god I fancy. I have no real preference, so my plan is to, over the course of a few videos, or one or two at least, paint 1 or 2 fellows from each and simply decide which theme I like the best. Today, we start with Chaos Undivided. Looking at the book thing I got with these secondhand miniatures, these Undivided guys are pretty much black with silver and some gold trim. So the first step is to paint all metal. For the silver, or whatever white metal is, I use the Vallejo Air Silver and a tiny brush. The flow of this stuff is so great that I've not found any way to stop it from reaching beyond the belly. Instead I've just given up and use a really small brush. Usually I just fill it up and use the miniature as a palette, quickly spreading it all over, wherever it needs to go. Vince would probably turn in his grave if he was dead, but he's not, so it's fine. You don't have to be too neat, but try to avoid all the non-metal areas. I also bring out some gold and cover a selection of prominent trim. Just whatever makes for a nice change from the plain silver. Like stuff up front and some sticky outer bits. Then we start the messy part. I rub some burnt umber onto the cape and any leather bits. Preferably you rub it in, oil colored dry, but you can put a tiny bit of white spirit in the brush to get into the recesses. Just don't overdo it. As you might be able to tell, I'm able to use a rather large brush, so it does not take a lot of time. After the burnt umber, cover everything else in black color. The same thing applies here. Try to rub it on, but it should not be, hard work either. If a bit of white spirit in there makes it easier, well, go for it. Because as you might suspect, it will soon be wiped away anyway. To wipe, I will be using the usual cotton bud, but feel free to use any device of the same effect. But whatever you use, do not dip it in white spirit first. Start dry with the cloak and the other leathery stuff. This means that you will not get a clean wipe, and even the highest ridges will get a sort of soft light brown color. This is why you should try to rub it in rather than paint it on. Then you dip the other end in white spirit, rinse it off and clean up the armor in a more common way, but still not quite. It is not a wash, and it's not meant to be just in the shadows, so keep a lot of it covering the armor and also the shield. Once again, this is why you should try to rub it in. and it's also preferable to wait a bit before you wipe it off. Real life forced me to do all of this in one go, and I just went down to have a cup of tea in between. You can really tell how it slides way too easily off the armor, and if that happens, just start over, just add some more and try again. I mean, at this stage it's not like we have a high precision anyway. If there are places that you cannot reach with your cotton bud or where you will need some precision, just use a brush soaked in white spirit and wipe off the excess, and then you just clean up whatever. It works like an eraser. You now have a solid coverage of some sort of color in all the recesses and a patchy coverage in other areas. Now we move on with the burnt umber, but as a topper in the black fur. This is to bring a bit of warm color in there, making it look more like something that was actually taken from a living thing. Then we use one of the most useful colors of all time, buff. I usually mix most of my colors myself, and buff is actually really easy to mix. Just add a touch of burnt umber to a patch of white. Then you can also adjust the brightness. But this mix is also so common that, I just bought one. I think it saves me a lot of time. You use it to smudge brush all things that are organic. In case you're not familiar with smudge brush, it is basically to deposit color on top of another by stippling, and then, just smearing it into the underlying color by a motion that is very similar to dry brush. But it can also be done the other way around. And that's what we do, most notably in the recesses of the cloak. Deposit a bit of black oil and then swipe upwards. Thanks to the nature of oil colors, things will just naturally blend. Just be careful not to start with too much black, and don't swipe back and forth too many times, because I will just make a brown mess. Finally, there are a few bits, like the horns or a skull. I think these guys have a skull on the back that needs to go all the way to almost white. As everything has a thin layer of black or brown, any white will automatically slide into an off-white, which is useful. Now they are already in a decent tabletop condition. It is possible just to baste them and call it a day, but I think they're a bit too bland. With a handful of tiny steps, we can make them look like, we actually care. First, I took some black ink and mixed it with Flow Improver. This mix goes into the helmet cutout things, or whatever you call the little holes in the helmet, to provide a solid contrasting color. You can also do a few lines of dark wherever you feel you need a bit more of a definition. Why I bothered to bring out the ink instead of just using black oil and a bit of white spirit, it's sort of a mystery. But I suppose this is something you can do even without the oil colors. Because, well, it's true. Anyway, next up is touching up the gold. Mainly the top part of things and the sticky outer bits. It is a quick way to promote the color contrast to the silver. Another quick and easy way to get some transitions in there is the use of pigments. I want to save the actual colors to the other gods, so I opted for oxide black pigment. It is the same pigment as in the black oil I used, so it might be hard to tell the difference on the video, but it's easy, and in reality it provides some gradient from top to bottom. It is likely that we'll see more of it in another paint job. And the last one is the most fun one. Blood is red due to the presence of iron. Oxide red is basically the fancy name for rust. So I bring out my oxide red oil color and a preferably quite bad brush. Just get some on the uneven tips and dab it onto the miniature. Due to the gunky nature of the oil colors, you will even get a bit of a 3D texture and a splash of actual color in there. So don't dilute it with black to make it sort of a realistic blood. You need the color. Because whenever you paint dark and pale stuff, you also need something bright and colorful to give a reference to contrast to. Finally, base them in any way you fancy. In order to blend with the rest of the army, I do the same simple pre-made stuff as I did with my old school warriors. I hope they will get along. The main difference between these and the Bretonians I did is that here the oil colors are not just used for shading. They're actually used for painting as well. And I didn't opt for that because of any sort of superior result. It's just that I like to paint with all colors. I find that painting with contrast paint, it's more like painting by numbers, and I want to use the oil colors because you can blend and do all kind of fancy stuff, and you feel more like an artist. Even if the end result might not be artist grade, but hey, that's not the point, The point is, don't forget to enjoy your hobby.